Professor, thank you very much for your time. In your statement, you're saying SAPA is not happy with the government's decision to close schools again. Can you tell me why?
Thank you for having me on your show. And you're right, we're not happy. If you have a home where you have a responsible parent who's not under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and who can give their children nutrition and also a safe environment, then you can choose to keep them at home and educate them at home. But we know many of our kids are not in a safe environment. Their parents are now going back to work, often leaving kids on their own. Sometimes these kids just don't have any food, and so even when they go to school, they get a cup of soup or a slice of bread. So school is not just about education, but it's also about safety for kids, keeping them off the streets where they're not social distancing anyway, but they're more at risk of being run over by cars, or in the Cape, lots of gang shootings, so they get stuck in crossfire. And we've also seen quite severe burns. So we think school is about education, but also about nutrition, about mental stimulus, and also safety in terms of what's going on outside in the world. So we've opened the economy. We're sending our parents back to work in busy taxis, but now we're trying to keep our kids at home, and that's where we have a problem.
The part of the statement also says that the decision is not backed by scientific evidence. What do you think it's being backed by, and what scientific evidence should be used instead?
So I'm not going to say why it's being backed by, but I am going to say we keep an eye on all the scientific evidence that's happening in the rest of the world, and we know that kids, if they do get COVID, will be less severely affected. Their immune systems seem to be quite robust. And so we've been watching what goes on in the rest of the world. In China, over 50% of 12 to 18-year-olds who are not at school have become frankly depressed. And so we actually really are trying to think what's in the best interest for the kids. We've seen in the country there have been, I think, up to now 9,000 deaths in adults, and only 26 children have actually succumbed to this virus. So we know that it really is something that affects older people, and if children do get it, they won't be as sick. And so we're saying stick to the basic rules: hand sanitizing, masks, and try and spread the desks out, a bit of social distancing. If you've got a very big class, then try and be innovative. A lot of the schools are really on top of it, and they were actually doing school days on alternate days, or some kids come in the morning, some in the afternoon. So we think that there's smart ways of doing it. As a parent, we realize it's really tough. And if you can ensure safety and education and nutrition, by all means, keep your child at home. But we know that that's not the reality for a lot of our kids and a lot of our families. And so we need to open the economy. We need to get things going. A lot of parents just don't have anybody sensible to look after them. And so at the hospital where I work, we're seeing a lot of child abuse, a lot of injuries, which could be prevented if these kids were back at school. And the evidence shows that kids, if they do get it, get a far less severe form of this illness. But we realize it's tough, and it's a tough decision. And so obviously very controversial. It's the prickly pear of what's going on at the moment, but really important that we actually try and do what's best for the kids.
I see your cat or dog wants to be part of the interview as well, wants to have their 5 cents worth as well. They don't have to worry about school, Prof. It does find the government, though, Professor McCulloch, in a very difficult situation. If they open the schools and there is an increase of COVID-19 in schools, they're going to be criticized for being too hasty in opening up schools. They close the schools down, and there's critics saying that they shouldn't do it. Where do you think there's a balance here? Open all the schools for all the grades, or should we try that staggered approach again?
So I think the staggered approach is the way to go. And actually just watch carefully. At the moment, the kids are running around in the streets. They're in the shopping malls. They're not sitting at home diligently doing their schoolwork. And so a staggered approach, being sensible about it. If you can do homeschooling, I think it should be a parent's choice to be able to do that. But if you can't do that, we know that a lot of the kids and a lot of the nurses and the teachers, in fact, are getting this infection in their communities, in the taxis, on the way to work, and also in our tea rooms. In the hospitals, we've been very careful to spread our tea rooms out, to try and close some of them that are very small, because we know that people, as adults, often give it to each other. And we call it this mask downtime. When you take your mask off, you have your coffee or your lunch break, you sit next to your friend, you look at your cell phone and you actually compare things, and that's when people get this infection. So sure, kids may get it at school, but if we stick to our rules, we feel that there's far less of a risk than if they are running around in the communities. And we've all seen the kids running around in the communities. Their parents are sitting in taxis going to work, and so the chances are that community transmission at this stage is far more of an issue.
Professor, I thank you indeed for your time in speaking to us this afternoon. Professor Mignon Mcculloch from the South African Paediatric Association. She was citing some of the research that has been done. The first website I could find with all of those stats regarding COVID-19 in children, I found on medicalbrief.co.za. It is very, very detailed on breaking down COVID-19 with children. It's well worth a read if you want to get more information.